Real quick, the president of El Salvador is coming to the White House on Monday. Does President Trump want him to bring Karoline Abrego García with him?
The Supreme Court made their ruling last night very clear that it's the administration's responsibility to facilitate the return, not to effectuate the return. I believe the Department of Justice just filed another brief in the lower court. I would defer you to that for any updates. But as you mentioned, President Bukele will be here at the White House on Monday to talk about the cooperation that is at an all-time high. And we very much appreciate President Bukele and El Salvador's cooperation in the repatriation of El Salvadorian gang members who the previous administration allowed to infiltrate our country.
In April 2025, the Trump administration faced intense legal and political scrutiny following the wrongful deportation of Karoline Abrego García, a Maryland resident, to El Salvador. Despite a 2019 court ruling that barred his removal due to credible threats from gangs, Abrego García was deported. In March 2025, the administration acknowledged this as an administrative error. The U.S. Supreme Court unanimously ruled that the administration must facilitate Abrego García's return, but stopped short of ordering it to effectuate his return. This distinction became central to the administration's defense. White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt emphasized that the administration's responsibility was to facilitate, not effectuate the return. She also expressed appreciation for El Salvador's cooperation in repatriating Salvadorian gang members. U.S. District Judge Paula Shines expressed frustration over the administration's lack of transparency and noncompliance. She ordered the government to provide daily updates on efforts to return Abrego García, including his location and custodial status. The administration's stance has raised concerns among legal experts about the erosion of constitutional norms. Justice Sonia Sotomayor, in a separate opinion, warned that the administration's position could imply that even U.S. citizens might be deported without legal consequence, if done before court intervention. Further controversy arose when Press Secretary Leavitt confirmed that President Trump had discussed the idea of deporting incarcerated U.S. citizens to foreign prisons, such as those in El Salvador. Legal experts have criticized this notion as unconstitutional, violating the Eighth Amendment's prohibition against cruel and unusual punishment. Truth out. This case underscores the tensions between the executive branch and the judiciary over immigration enforcement and the limits of presidential authority. Time Judge orders daily updates on Trump administration's efforts to retrieve wrongly deported men. In a sharp rebuke to the Trump administration, U.S. District Judge Paula Shines has ordered federal officials to provide daily updates on efforts to locate and return Karoline Abrego García, a Maryland man wrongfully deported to El Salvador in March, despite a federal court order barring his removal. The order, issued late last week, demands that the government disclose Abrego García's physical location, custodial status, and specific steps taken each day to facilitate his return. Judge Shines described the administration's conduct as deeply troubling, citing what she called a failure to comply with a clear legal mandate. There must be accountability and transparency, Shines wrote in her ruling. The integrity of the judicial process requires nothing less. Abrego García, a longtime U.S. resident with pending asylum protections, was removed from the country after officials cited an administrative error. His deportation directly violated a 2019 court ruling that had halted his removal due to credible threats from gangs in El Salvador. The Supreme Court weighed in on the case last month, ruling unanimously that the administration must facilitate his return. However, the court notably stopped short of ordering the government to effectuate it, a legal distinction now at the heart of the administration's response. White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt defended the administration's handling of the case, stating that federal agencies are actively facilitating the return process, but are not legally required to ensure it is completed. The case has sparked nationwide debate over the limits of executive power, especially in matters of immigration enforcement. Legal scholars warn that failure to adhere to judicial orders undermines constitutional checks and balances. In a separate opinion, Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor warned that such actions, left unchecked, could pave the way for even U.S. citizens to be unlawfully deported. A hypothetical she called chilling. Judge Shinies has ordered the Department of Homeland Security to begin filing updates immediately. As of this report, Abrego Garcia's exact whereabouts remain unclear, and his return to the U.S. is still pending. This story
Process is currently
developing.
underway. On another matter, the deadline for registration under the Alien Registration Act is today. All foreign nationals present in the United States longer than 30 days must register with the federal government. Failure to comply with this is a crime, punishable by fines, imprisonment, or both. As President Trump and Secretary Noem have both said, if you register and you leave now, you choose to self-deport, you may have the opportunity to return later legally. But if not, you will be arrested, fined, deported, never to return to our country again. The Trump administration will continue to enforce our nation's immigration laws. We will not pick and choose which laws to enforce. We must know who is in our country for the safety and the security of our homeland and for all American citizens. I also have a note from the First Lady to share with you on this Friday. On Tuesday this week, First Lady Melania Trump celebrated the advancement of the Take It Down Act in the House Energy and Commerce Committee. The important legislation passed the committee with bipartisan support, and as you may remember, the President talked about this bill in his address to a joint session of Congress last month. The First Lady remains dedicated to her championing child well-being, ensuring that every young person can thrive, and, of course, championing her Be Best agenda. We urge Congress to swiftly pass this important legislation. Here in our new media seat today, we have Jordan Berman. Jordan is a social media content creator and influencer and a lawyer who grew up following breaking down the news from a neutral perspective. Jordan is the host of her own podcast called Unbiased Politics, where she dissects the top stories from the week from a legal perspective. Jordan focuses on bringing back real journalism from a nonpartisan perspective and has mastered explaining complex legal decisions to a mass audience in the short-form context. Her two biggest platforms are TikTok and Instagram, where she has roughly 500,000 followers on each. With that, please kick us off, Jordan.
Thank you. As you know, yesterday the House passed the SAVE Act, and many married women, soon-to-be married women, are concerned that the new voter ID requirements may inhibit their access to the polls. What assurances can you give women voters in America to ease their concerns?
Sure. Well, the SAVE Act, as you mentioned, was passed by the House yesterday. This is the Safeguard American Voter Eligibility Act. I believe I'm getting that correct. And this act is a common sense measure. It would require proof